Hello, thank you so much for tuning in again to Alpaca My Bags. If you like what you're hearing, do us a good one and leave us a review. Also remember to subscribe. All right, enjoy the show. Are you catching this? Welcome, you're listening to Alpaca My Bags. I'm your host, Erin. Today on the pod, we are chatting with Laurelle. Is that how I say your name?
Laurelle.
Laurelle, sorry.
It's okay.
Laurelle is an aesthetic instructor at George Brown College here in Toronto. She's also a yoga instructor. So she tells me that she loves her job, but her real passion is definitely traveling to new places. I can totally relate to that. And if you could make your full-time gig traveling, you would?
Oh, 100%.
Who wouldn't? Today we are going to chat about solo travel, and specifically women solo traveling. So in recent articles, I've seen statistics floating around that suggest that women today are traveling solo way more than men. We have touched on this subject a little bit in previous episodes, but in this ep, we really want to focus specifically on this.
Erin, what's on your mind recently?
There's always lots of things on my mind, as you know. So last Friday night, my partner and I had some beers, like casual Friday night. And then I casually told him, today when I was at work, I was bored. I found these super cheap return flights direct to go south. I'm not going to say where because we're teasing this. But I'll tell you that it's in Central America. So I told him at work that day I had really pondered buying these flights because they were that cheap. They're, full disclosure, they were $330 Canadian, which is really good for a direct flight. But I didn't do it because I was we're swearing off travel for a little bit. We're trying to save money. So I'm not going to do this right now. But then we were a few beers in and he was well, we should do it. And I was are you serious? You want to book this flight right now at 1 a.m. on Friday? And he was yeah, do it. And I was literally you have to give me your consent for this because I need you to remember that you consented to this tomorrow morning. And he was yeah, I consent. And then I booked the flights. And the next morning, luckily, he remembered. But yeah, so we're going to Central America. I'll give you guys a little clue. The flights were cheap, so obviously it's not too far, but it's not Canada and it's not America, and it's a direct flight. So
that's it?
That's all I'm telling you, yeah. That narrows it down. How many countries are in Central America? 6? Honduras, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Nicaragua. I'm seeing if I can name them all. Mexico.
I wouldn't be able to
Belize.
tell you.
Do you know any others? Belize? Did I say Honduras?
Did you say Panama?
Panama. 7. Anyways, I'm going to one of those.
So it's definitely
countries.
not Panama.
No, it's not Panama because I forgot it. That's such a good clue. It's right at the beginning. Anyways, if you want to guess where we're going to be going on these super cheap flights, you can comment on Facebook or on Instagram or whatever. You know how to reach us. All right, so I think we should probably share with people how we first met. Mm-hmm. Laurelle and I met in Australia, actually. Mm-hmm. We met in a bar, and it was because you were living in Australia. Yeah. How long had you been there for?
I think I'd been there 6 months or just over 6 months.
Yeah.
I think, something like that. It was definitely coming...
You've been there a while.
I've been there a while.
Yeah. And I had just landed in Australia and was staying with my friend Andrew Menard. And I get there and he picks me up from the airport. And it was literally one of the first things he said to me. He was don't worry, I found some Canadians for you to hang out with.
Seriously?
Yeah, he actually said that.
I didn't know that.
And he made a point of trying to find ways to make me hang out with other Canadians.
That's so
and
funny.
I was Menard, I didn't come all the way to Australia to meet other Canadians. But I met you, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was definitely awesome. I remember, I do remember meeting you, and I remember thinking, I was wow, this chick is cool. and at that time, I don't think I had many friends in Australia. So I was just happy to meet somebody new.
Well, I'm glad Menard brought us together. Thank you, Menard. If you're listening, you created this magic. All right, so icebreaker question. Most memorable trip you've ever been on?
So I'd have to say my most memorable trip was probably Bali. I spent 6 weeks there. So I was living in Australia at the time, and going from Australia to Bali is like crazy cheap. It was like $200, I think, my flight. And I was like putting off going home as long as possible. So I decided to go to Bali with one of my girlfriends from Australia. And she had never been. So we spent 2 weeks together, like traveling around. And she actually just sent me something today on Instagram, which was funny, to describe Nusa Penida. And I told her that when we were in Nusa Penida that she tried to kill me because she kept taking me on these crazy adventures. And every time I was like, I'm going to die. I was like, this is where I die. But every time on the other end, it would be like some beautiful, magical place. Yeah. And I was like, this is totally worth it.
That was amazing.
So it was so good. And then I had a week on my own there. And then I spent 3 weeks doing my yoga teacher training. It was amazing. I did not want to leave when I went there. Yeah, it was awesome.
All right, so now to get into the stuffs, I'm going to kick this discussion off by asking you, when was the first time that you solo traveled, and why did you solo travel? Like, what compelled it, and where did you go?
So my first time traveling alone, I was 22, and I decided to go to Australia. It wasn't really like, I didn't really set out to be like, I'm going to travel alone. I just wanted to go, and I couldn't find anyone to go with, and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to go by myself. It's going to be awesome. I did do a tour, and I wasn't scared at all, like, leading up to it. It was really strange. And then I got to the airport. I was fine. Said goodbye to my family. I was fine. On the plane, I was fine. I even, like, I got to, like, it was, like, all fine.
That's a long flight, too.
Yeah,
I'd be,
and
like,
I was like, I'm
ruminating
good.
on it.
I was like, I'm good. I'm good. And then got a bus, like, in Australia to my hotel. And I was taking in the sights, enjoying it, and finally got to my hotel. Talked to my mom, was like, yeah, I'm here. Then I get into my hotel room, and I was like, oh, shit. I was like, I'm on the other side of the world, and I'm completely alone. And then I started crying. And then so I called my mom, and it must have been like 3 a.m. there, bawling, being like, why did I do this? I don't know why I did this by myself. And then got off the phone with her, and 10 minutes later, I had met friends, and it was fine. So it was, it was unplanned, but it was awesome. I was like exhilarating traveling alone.
Totally. And I can like totally relate to that, because I think that the way I ended up solo traveling was really similar, in that I wanted to travel, and I tried so hard to get like friends to do it with me, and they would always back out.
Yeah, exactly.
Like no one was serious. And so eventually you're just like, well, I'm just doing it alone then.
Yeah. I was like, I'm not letting this stop me. I was like, I have to go. Like, I want to go. So I'm booking it.
Doing it.
And it's easy to book it.
Yeah.
It's like after, like, you're like, oh, right, I have to follow through with this.
I know. But it's weird because, like you, when I first started doing it, I never thought to myself, oh, I'm solo traveling. It was just like, oh, I'm traveling.
I know, exactly.
And then, like, you don't realize you're alone until you're actually
alone. And then you're like, oh.
Yeah. So I know that when I began solo traveling, people, like friends, family, would caution me when I told them about the trip. I distinctly remember telling my colleague a couple years ago that I was headed to Costa Rica, where I was going to backpack alone for like 3 weeks. And she was like, be careful, you're going to be kidnapped. And she said it with like such seriousness. And I remember like, it was like when the anxiety started, like she planted the first seed of anxiety. And then I remember like having dinner with my family, and my parents being like, be very careful, like don't go out alone, like at night. And I was like, and I remember the whole trip afterwards, I was terrified of nighttime. Yeah. And it was just because it was all this like anxiety that was built up in me that didn't exist and was literally planted by other people.
For sure.
And I felt that it did me a disservice because it kind of tainted like my excitement for the trip. I know that leading up to it, I had like such a growing sense of doom, which in retrospect wasn't like valid.
Yes.
It wasn't nearly the scary place that like people told me it was going to be. And I also felt like no one trusted me to treat my own life with care. Like people questioned my judgment. People, like whenever people made comments, it felt like they were insinuating that I was not smart for choosing to do this alone, and that like I didn't understand the situation I was putting myself in. And I remember feeling like deeply hurt and deeply bothered by this. And like you, at the same time, you know that the caution that you get from like friends and family comes from a place of caring, but it still kind of hurts.
For sure.
And I struggle with this a lot of the time. Like, can you relate to that feeling?
Oh, definitely. I've had so many experiences with that. I mean, even going to Australia's not a scary country.
No.
And my mom, like, put it in my head that she was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I need your approval before I can feel okay about this. And then when I went to other places, like Southeast Asia on my own, I had the same thing where people were like, why are you doing this? Like, why can't you just find someone to go with?
Yeah.
And so you do build up this whole thing in your head that's not there. And I've had instances where I arrive in countries and I'm panicking because I'm listening to all the people that have said things to me.
Totally. To counter that, have you found it empowering to travel solo?
Oh, definitely. I've definitely found it empowering. I never realized that I could do it. Like I told you previously, it wasn't something that I set out to do, but as a kid, I was so shy. I didn't really socialize a lot. I hated sleepovers. I was attached to my mom. Like, I used to cry every day in kindergarten. So when I decided to start traveling alone, my mom was like, you weren't supposed to do this to me. Yeah. She was like, you weren't the child that was supposed to leave me. And then I was like, yeah, but I have to do it. And I found that it really made me the person I am today.
Yeah.
I mean, when you go alone, you don't have to worry about anybody. You get to do your own thing. You find your own way. Like, I'm directionally challenged, and I found my way.
Yeah.
You get lost, but you find it eventually.
Yeah.
So I love it. It's amazing.
I really think that it's character building and, like, confidence building.
Definitely.
Because, like you, I was always, like, quite an introvert, and I feel like traveling, being forced to socialize because, like, there's no one to talk to. Like, I remember there being days I'd be in my hostel bed and be like, I need to go out into the common room and make a friend. Otherwise, I'm going to go crazy.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I haven't talked to another human being in a week.
And I find when you haven't talked to someone, it comes so much easier because you're like, I just want human interaction. You're like, I just need someone to talk to me. Yeah. And it's amazing. So many people travel alone. It's so easy to make friends.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I actually argue that, like, the confidence that I built while traveling and also, like, my sociability has benefited me in, like, other areas of life. Like, I noticed I'm much better at interviews. And I think it's because I'm used to talking to people I don't know now.
For sure.
And that's totally a skill that, like, I didn't learn in school.
No, you learn so much traveling, like, so much about different cultures. And one of the things I was telling a client recently was, I was like, everyone's the same. Like, you go to all these different countries and you realize we're all the same.
Yeah.
And it's so refreshing.
Yeah.
And it's like, why is there so much, like, conflict in the world when we're just like, let's just reunite? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And, like, that's the thing, you'll always find something in common with someone, especially if you're forced to.
Exactly.
Like, I have found myself, okay, like, not to get too political, but I have found myself having, like, a nice conversation with, like, an American who supports Trump before. Never thought I would say that, but, like, it happens.
It's true.
It happens when you're traveling.
Yeah, it's so true.
So I've actually written about, like, how I've found travel empowering on my website. And so I wanted to bring up, like, some points that I wrote about because I think, like, I've thought these out a lot and I think that they really ring true. You said this already, like, you get to do you and you're in complete control of your trip. So, like, where you stay, what you do, how you budget, what you eat, it's all you. And that's, like, so freeing because I've found, like, in trips following that, like, when you travel with other people, it's a constant balancing act.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I actually find that when I travel with other people now, I'm like, oh, I just wish I was alone. But then, like, at the same time, like, I love traveling with people, but you have this such a different kind of freedom when you're alone. You really don't have to worry about anyone else, and you don't have to worry about your mood either. Yeah. Like, you don't have to make sure you're always being nice. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because if you're not in the mood, you can just go off on your own.
Yes. Yes. So I also, like, I talked about this already a little bit, but it forces you to build confidence, but also independence, and it teaches you what you're capable of because you're put in situations that you definitely wouldn't be faced with in your like day-to-day life at home. I've encountered, like, major crises while traveling, and they're just situations that would never happen at home. Or if they did happen at home, I would have family or friends or my partner around to support me.
Exactly. It's so true.
I also think it's amazing to travel solo because you're forced to spend time with yourself, which is something you don't do at home.
No, you don't.
I just think back to like when I was traveling Europe alone and I would sit on a train for like 14 hours. This was like pre-cell phones. I didn't have any form of media. I would just sit there.
Yeah.
And like
That's
think
awesome.
about things.
Yeah.
And people don't do that anymore.
No, they don't. They really don't.
And so I found that like spending that time with yourself, you really do learn things about yourself that you wouldn't otherwise be forced to learn.
For sure.
Yeah. I remember there were moments like going into like very scary thought places. But you're like, I can't not. Like, it's the only thing I have to do right now.
Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, I realize that I'm really calm in bad situations which I would have never predicted. Like, my friends are like, why aren't you crying? And I was like, it's fine. It's okay. Like, what am I going to do? Like, it's fine. I've had like a series of things happen when I was in Bali. Yeah. And like I said, it's like one of my favorite trips. But I had a lot of stuff go wrong. Oh, yeah. Like, I had my passport get water damage.
Oh, no.
So I hit like we were staying on a cliff. Like seriously, like a cliff. So to get off, you had to like go down the beach. And I guess it was a really high tide when we were trying to get down.
Yeah.
And this wave, and I'm not joking, like I call it the rogue wave that came out of nowhere, and everyone's like, Laurelle. And I'm like, it came out of nowhere. So I was like walking, my friend took a step high, and then all of a sudden this wave went over my head, and I had my phone in my hand.
No.
And my friend turns around, I'm drenched, she's completely dry. And she said she almost laughed until she saw my face. And then I was like, my phone, like that was my first thought. And I had my passport in my bag. So my phone was dead, completely dead. And then I checked my passport and only my picture's damaged. Only my picture. No other part of my passport, just my picture. And then the next day, I got locked out of my bank account. And I was like, what is happening? Yeah.
I can't top that. That's like a really bad series of events.
And literally my friend was like, You're scary calm. She's like, I'm like waiting for you to explode. I'm like, no. Like, I'm like, what am I gonna do?
Literally nothing you can do.
I'm like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I had to get, the best part was I had to get a visa in Bali because I had to extend my stay with my water damage passport. So I was like, inside, I was freaking out. I was like, it'll work out. Yeah. It has to work out.
Well, what's the worst that would happen? You'd be stuck in Bali for the rest of your life.
So I was like, whatever, it's fine. I'm not on the time constriction, so it's fine.
Yes, that's amazing. So solo travel has definitely become more of a thing for women. So I'm going to bust out some stats now. According to a 2014 Booking.com survey, I'm going to just preface this and say, like, I don't know how reliable this data is. It's Booking.com, but we'll see. They say that 72% of American women like to travel solo. A research company in the UK called Hitwise found that 55% of solo travel searches are made by women. A woman named Aditi Shrikant wrote a Vox article that was published this past January. And she wrote that this phenomenon of solo women travelers could be attributed to women of recent generations who have like more means and fewer obligations than women of past generations, which is like a totally valid conclusion to make. We have children later, we have full-time jobs, people get married later. There's lots of reasons that can make travel possible. Logistically, travel today is way more doable. And she also notes that today travel is often portrayed as a type of self-care or opportunity for self-reflection. And these are things that women allegedly are willing to invest money in. She writes that statistically, women today, especially women from cities in North America, have traded in marriage and kids for careers. They have more money and more flexibility, and like millennials at large, are searching for fulfilling experiences. So yeah, this makes total sense to me, especially in the context of the recent millennial obsession with like self-actualization and self-care. I notice this on Instagram all the time.
It's so big.
Like people frame their trips as self-care, like whether their trip is a yoga retreat or backpacking in Central America. I find this really interesting too because I don't remember it being like that when I started backpacking when I was like 19, which is 2009.
Yeah.
Pre like social media boom.
Yeah, social media is definitely taken over the travel world, I think.
Yeah. So, like, what's your experience on yoga retreats been in this department?
I find that you get a lot of solo women coming to yoga retreats. I think it's just, it's easier. Like, you feel more comfortable around it because you know that it's mostly women, generally. You do get the odd, like, guy, but it's usually with their girlfriend, or there's not usually a solo guy, like, generally. And I think it's empowering. Like, you have women that are all kind of like-minded, like they're going there all for the same reason, just kind of like, I don't know, self-reflection, and they want to do a daily yoga practice, and they're all so supportive of each other. Like, it's very interesting. Like, it's all different kinds of women, people that you wouldn't normally hang out with. Like, when you first meet people, sometimes you're kind of like, I don't know about you. But by the end, you're always like, you're amazing.
Super tight,
yeah, like, you're super cool. And like, if you met them on the street, you're like, I would never hang out with them. Yeah. And even despite all the differences, they're just supporting each other. Like, it's amazing. So I think that's why a lot of women get attracted to yoga retreats.
Yeah, and it is a vacation more than it is like intrepid traveling.
Exactly.
Like, you're going there to relax and like work on yourself.
Yeah, there's usually like spa treatments that you can do and stuff like that. As well as I don't know, they usually have like fun little activities you can do and like workshops and stuff. So
yeah, so it's not like yoga 24/7.
No, usually there's free time, and they usually, I think most of them from my experience have done, like, they'll do like a really early yoga practice, and then they'll have one in the evening that's more of like a restorative kind of deal, so it's kind of nice. And yeah, it's amazing. And then you have like some free time during the day usually.
Do you ever encounter people on them that aren't there for like the self-actualization or self-care aspect? Are there people that are just like, I just love yoga?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely get those people like that. They're just like, I just want to do yoga all the time.
Yeah.
And you do get the hardcore like workout people, which I find really interesting. There's usually like always one. And you're like,
that are like working out 24/7.
Yeah.
Like going for a jog at 5 in the morning.
Where one of the girls was like, let's do a HIIT workout. And I was like, and she was like, come on. And I was like, okay. I was like dying. I was like, why am I doing this? I was like, this is not why I'm here. But yeah, it was an experience for sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to wrap up part 1 of this episode. In the next part, we're going to talk a little bit about safety while traveling as a solo woman. We're also going to share a little story about traveling to Morocco. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant about something related to Saudi Arabia. So listen in. We'll catch you on the flip side.